Hi there, this is Despi with FOFA News, and today we're going to be going over a more perfect union video talking about a Tyson plant, a Tyson meatpacking plant that's closing in Nebraska. So let's get into this and see what this video is all about.
What happens when a company fires half of a town's workers? That's exactly what Tyson Foods is about to do.
All the money for the town is coming from the Tyson.
Everybody basically that I know works there.
I'm in Lexington, Nebraska, a small, diverse town of roughly 11,000 people. Tyson Foods is by far the largest employer in town, with about 3,200 people in its beef processing plant.
Over half of my customer base either works there or knows somebody that depends on Tyson.
It is everywhere in the town.
But in November 2025, Tyson announced that it's shutting down the plant due to low cattle supply. This has left thousands of people in Lexington who rely on the company in limbo, unsure of what comes next.
We're going to stop here just for a second and talk about this. So as you saw in there, we're talking about a plant for a town of about 11,000. And usually when these towns are counting people, they're not necessarily counting people that are within city limits. They're also counting people that live outside the city, but are in like the general vicinity. So when we're talking about a plant that's closing that brings in 3,200 jobs for a city of 11,000, that is like a third of the population. So that is absolutely massive and devastating for a small town. Now, if you think about that, that is roughly 1/3 of the town works at that plant. Can you imagine what would happen if when the plant closes down, what happens to the financial situation for the for a third of the town that lives there? I mean, a third of the town that lives there. So the other thing to keep in mind is that when they're saying that they don't have access to cattle, that's a downright lie. And the reason why I say that's a downright lie is that if you actually look at like beef production and domestic use of beef in the United States uses 85% of its own beef domestically. And because it has such a high usage, it doesn't need to import beef. Because it has such a high use of domestic beef, there's no need to import. We have a huge domestic structure within the United States to completely take care of all of this. So when they say that there aren't enough cattle, that's a brazen lie. It's an excuse that they're giving that is not the truth, that in essence validate the closing of the plant. But it isn't the actual truth. So let's keep going.
They feel like their life is over.
What happens if the school all of a sudden loses 1/3 of their population? What happens to the tax base?
You got 3,000 people looking for work. You can't put everybody to work in these little places that they got around here.
Yeah.
What are they going to do?
And this plant closure is happening in the middle of a national beef crisis.
Beef prices have soared to all-time highs.
A record high, up nearly 50% from 5 years ago.
The only price we have that's high is beef, and we'll get that down.
We spoke to the plant's workers and local business owners about the ripple effects of one of the biggest factory closures in decades.
Hearing that news was like hard, because the first thing you think is like, I'm gonna lose my house.
This plant was the one who give the life to this town. If the plant is going to close, the town is going to be a ghost town.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, plants closing like this in small towns and small areas like this is absolutely devastating to an entire community. You can see a thriving community go and almost immediately just go completely under and become a ghost town, like they were saying. One of the places that I know where this happened is a long time ago, and we're talking 20 years ago. I went to community college in a place called Coffeyville, Kansas. Now, if you know Coffeyville, Kansas, when I went there, it was about 15,000 people in the town. Now, outside of the town, you had a refinery, like an oil refinery that people worked at. The other thing that they had was they had an Amazon, an Amazon distribution center, where you could get a job working at the Amazon distribution center and make a lot of money. And it was actually a really, really nice job to have. The other thing is working out at the refinery. If you worked out at the refinery, it's a pretty stable job. Well, I think it was like 2006, 2007, somewhere in there was a major flood that went through there. And the flood that went through there all but destroyed the refinery, and Amazon pulled out, I think either a year or two after I left, and the distribution center was just gone. So the refinery decided to close shop. The distribution center was gone, and now when you go back there and take a look, it's like a ghost town. Like, there's nothing there. There are people that live there, but they're vacant lots. There's vacant housing. It's no longer a thriving town. And this is exactly the kind of thing that they're worried about here within this piece.
Pues uno se siente pues mal porque literal nos acaban de quitar todo, o sea, y luego que te hayan dicho de un día para otro.
But the story doesn't end here. We also talked to trade lawyers and economists who say that there's a radical solution that could save this plant and the future of American beef production as we know it.
There is a sign-on bonus.
You notice there was a 4-H sign.
And then we do have some positions
4-H is
available
usually
right
the backbone
now.
of a lot of these rural communities.
So right now we're at a job fair that's just down the street from the Tyson plant, and there are about 90 companies from the state of Nebraska and around the region talking to Tyson workers about other job opportunities. For many, this will mean leaving Lexington entirely if they can't stay here in the community.
No hay empresas abiertas, no hay trabajos.
There's no jobs here.
No,
There's no opportunities here. Does your wife also work at Tyson?
Yeah, for her it's about $25 per hour. For me it's about 31.
And when you talk to these companies here, what are they offering?
Less than that.
Nos iban a ofrecer trabajo en otras compañías mismo Tyson, pero en otros lugares. Y yo ayer fui a registrarme y me dijeron, no, pues es que no es seguro, porque como es muchísima gente, no vamos a tener trabajo para todos.
Tyson's plant in Lexington processes 5% of all beef in the U.S. Some work
5% of beef in the United States. What does that mean? What that means is that is a crap ton of beef. Because if you think about like all of the other players, all of the other major players within the United States, you have like, Cargill, National Beef, Tyson, and there's one other one that I'm forgetting right now. And the thing to keep in mind is that with these different beef companies, like they all take a share of the pie of the beef that they're going to be processing. If this plant is processing 5% of the total amount of beef that's produced in the United States, that is a massive number, a massive amount of meat. So for them to say that there aren't enough cows is ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous.
Workers blame the plant closure on Tyson's fear of competition with Sustainable Beef, a smaller beef processing plant partially owned by Walmart that opened in a neighboring city.
In order for this company to make money, they're going to close this one down because the one in North Platte opened. They don't want to be competing with them with the prices of the cattle. Because if they're paying less money for the cattle, then they're not going to make as much money over here.
Competition is basically non-existent in meatpacking, where 4 companies control almost 90% of the market.
We've allowed concentration to go so off the charts. One of the reasons why we're seeing these closures despite record high prices is we've allowed these ultra mega meatpacking plants, we're talking like 7,000 beef cows a day, where if they can't sustain that volume, they don't work.
Those big 4 meat packers work together to fix prices, to fix wages, and really to control the market so that they don't have to face any real competition.
You might be asking,
So that is the real deal with the whole thing. This is all about competition and getting beef at the absolute lowest price, which is not only just a problem for the people that are working at the meatpacking plants, but it's also a problem for the ranchers themselves. Now, you look at this from like the perspective of the company. What the company's looking at is they're seeing that there's competition in the area. If they are the only player in the area, then that means that they can set the prices for however they want to set the beef price. So if they want to buy at a particular poundage and and get a particular price at a poundage to maximize their profits, then they can basically never have to raise prices on the amount that they pay for the cattle that are coming in to be processed into beef, and they can pay a minimum amount to the ranchers themselves that are bringing in the cattle. Now, if you look at this, and when I say ranchers, I actually mean like cows that are being finished off in feedlots. Once they're in the feedlot and they're being finished off, and when I say finished off, I mean that they're literally being packed, fed, and fattened before they actually go to slaughter. And when the cows get to that feedlot, there's only a specific amount of time that they can be there before they have to be processed. So anybody that's bringing cattle to a feedlot, there's only a certain amount of time that cattle can stay in the feedlot before it's actually getting processed. So when the ranchers bring them in, they're on a time crunch for the amount of money and the best money that they can get from them. When a competitor like that Sustainable Beef comes in, that means that Sustainable Beef can outbid Tyson for the amount of beef or the price of beef that they can get from them. So if they're buying the beef at, let's just say, 10 cents a pound higher or 20 cents a pound higher or even $1 higher per pound, then Tyson in a free market or a fair market would have to raise the amount of money that they're willing to pay to buy beef for that. They don't want to do that. They work in kind of a cartel system, kind of like how your internet service provider, depending on what location in the United States you live, you basically have a completely different internet service provider. And none of the other internet service providers really overlap in those areas. They have, in essence, a cartel that they can basically set the prices they want, set the services they want, and there's no other competition around them. The meat packers do a similar thing where they'll put a Tyson plant in someplace and there'll be nothing around that Tyson plant to basically take the beef from the Tyson plant so that meat packer can set the price for it. But the second something comes in and messes that up, like that Sustainable Beef, immediately they're going to shut down that plant and move to a completely different location that's going to be where that they can buy beef without having to worry about having to pay slightly more for the beef so that they can maximize profits. And like I've said in previous videos before, what do we call this? Fiduciary responsibility. But let's get back.
Wouldn't closing a large domestic plant like this have a drastic effect on the beef supply chain?
We're going to lose this massive plant, and that's going to depress the price that ranchers receive and make beef more expensive. Now, they don't mind because long-term, these packers, they're vertically integrated abroad, so that they don't mind shifting to an imported model. Rather than processing beef domestically, they'll just revert to imports.
Roughly 13% of the beef Americans eat is imported, and in many cases, it's cheaper to bring beef in from abroad than to raise and slaughter cattle in the US. That gives major meat packers like Tyson flexibility to rely more on imports when a large domestic plant goes offline. Tyson says they're shutting down the Lexington plant due to low cattle supply and higher operating costs. But local residents wonder if the company has ulterior motives. Why do you think?
And they do have ulterior motives. I mean, think about it. If you know that you can set the price wherever you want, however you want, and no one's going to stop you because you and your buddies basically control the price across the United States, I don't see how this isn't a problem. I don't see how they're not broken up. I don't see how the United States government hasn't stepped in and basically saying that these meat packers have to be broken up into smaller entities. This is absolutely disgusting on two different fronts. The ranchers themselves are getting less per pound or the same per pound, but it's not matching the rate of inflation. It's not matching like the actual cost of all of the the medicines that are necessary whenever you're running an operation like this. None of the other items that you need for operational costs on a farm itself, whether it be gasoline, all of these other items, all of the prices of that stuff is going up, and the amount of money that they're getting for the cattle is like bare bones. It's really hard for them to turn a profit. If this was like the 1980s, you would see that the profit margin for actually bringing cattle to slaughter would have been closer to like 60 to 70% of a profit margin of what you're basically putting in and the amount of money you're getting back out. Where it is right now, it's almost at like 10 to 15%, which is almost completely unsustainable unless you're working at an extremely large scale. And trying to find ranchers that deal with herds of cattle, like in the thousands of heads, like once you start getting over like 2,000, like you're getting closer to like a corporate range. It's really hard for ranches and ranchers to deal with heads of cattle in an extremely large number without an extremely large operation and a corporate-like structure. And that's not also to say that what they're doing with the workers that work in these plants is also a problem. So if you're working for Tyson and you decide that you want to go and let's say work for Cargill across the street, or you want to go work for National Beef, you can expect the exact same wages, the exact same conditions, the exact same everything, benefits, the whole 9 yards, and you're not going to get much different. And the reason is they don't want to pay anybody more. They're not competing with each other. They basically have their own territory, and they have a gentleman's agreement between them not to encroach on each other's territory and to work in a way that when people are trying to find jobs there or ranchers are trying to sell to them, that they all keep the same prices so everything stays low. And that's basically how this is run right now. So you have one mega corporation that's controlling the price of beef, and the ranchers are getting screwed, and the workers inside those plants are also getting screwed at the same time. And all that money is just funneling straight to the top.
The company is doing this now.
It's not because they're doing bad, because this plant has always been in the green, always. Even when I was a supervisor 30 years ago.
So, do you think that they need to stay open?
They should, but are they going to? No, because it don't benefit them.
They probably don't want another meat packer in here. We've heard that the building isn't even for sale.
When Tyson comes in and says, we're not selling the plant, we're shutting it down, what that will automatically do is move the price of cattle down and keep the price of beef high or move it even higher.
This is
Tyson and the other
like
supply meat packers
They're
use
making
strategic shutdowns so that they can make higher profits.
They're making less demand.
The first time they did that was in the late 2000s.
Supply at the same time, so
but they did
can
it
shift
again and on a
prices.
bigger scale in the mid-2010s.
Hundreds of people are temporarily off the job after the shutdown of a meat processing plant.
I don't know what all these people are going to do. Some of them have been there for years.
Now they're doing it for a third time.
The meatpacking industry hasn't always worked this way.
In the mid-20th century, there was a big campaign to enforce the antitrust laws, to impose rules on dominant players that made it hard for them to exclude smaller competitors, to exclude entrepreneurs. By the 1960s, we had an industry where the biggest four meat packers controlled only like 22% of beef production in this country.
Which is how it should be.
The result of that really competitive environment was a reindustrialization of rural America. A lot of those new meat packing companies opened plants in small towns, in rural communities, creating lots of new jobs that led to, by the 1970s, for the first time in a century, small towns actually growing.
And very true.
Fast forward to today, and consolidation has created a different picture. According to USDA data, the price of beef is roughly 12 times more than it was 50 years ago. Meanwhile, the percentage of that money going to the farmer has decreased dramatically.
When we did have a lot of small companies competing against each other, the meat packers in...
And there's something really important to keep in mind with this. When ranchers are telling you that they're struggling, this is what they mean that they're struggling. You saw the chart that they just showed there, where they saw the price of beef going up and up and up and up, but the price that the cattle ranchers, like the price that they were receiving for their beef, was going down and down and down, almost kind of like an opposite of the price of beef going up. This is basically those four main players buying up the entire all of the different small companies all around so they could have their cartel. And they are absolutely vicious about running the prices down entirely. Now, you all remember 2022, 2021 during COVID, when we had like the shipping crisis, and we had a hard time getting like plants in, and like the price of beef went up like really, really high. One of those reasons was because with the shipping crisis, we'd have tried to get ships to come in to deliver cattle feed. And so we produce a lot of corn in the United States, but we only use about 10% of all crops that we like make within the United States. Everything else gets exported. So where were we getting corn for the feed for the cows for this? We were getting it from Brazil. So we were having a shortage of corn feed from Brazil, which was causing the price of feed to skyrocket. Now, the feedlots and the ranchers are the people that would use that feed corn to fatten up the cattle. The meat packers have literally nothing to do with that, okay? So the ranchers and the feedlots are eating the cost of the cattle with the feed that they have to buy for them during that time period. But the meat packers turned around and basically used that cost of feed as a reason for why the price of beef was high, even though they didn't pay the price tag for that. They kept buying beef at the same price from the ranchers, who were basically getting next to nothing for it. They were basically breaking even the entire time. So the price of beef skyrocketed during COVID, even though the meat packers never paid a cent more.
That market couldn't just like shut down a plant to manipulate the demand for cattle at strategic points. They only had 1, 2, or 3 plants. And so they needed those plants to be running in order to bring money in and stay in operation.
In October, when President Trump proposed increasing beef imports from Argentina to bring down those beef prices, ranchers were outraged. Later, he suggested that something fishy was going on with meat packers, calling on a DOJ investigation, which just happened to be the same conclusion the Biden administration had come to a few years ago. More Perfect Union is covering the larger story of how consolidation has warped the relationship between beef prices and cattle prices in another video you can watch on our channel. But with this plant closure, we wanted to ask, what kind of big picture thinking is it going to take to keep beef?
All right, so I'm just going to make this like really short and simple, so I'm not going to like cut back or anything. Basically, the Trump administration was going to import the beef from Argentina, and what that's going to do is going to drive it down the cost of American beef and the amount of beef that the ranchers could actually bring in. And if you saw that chart, that means they're going to be making even less money, and the meat packers are going to be able to get this meat internationally at a much lower price, which you would think is nice and everything. But even before Trump started doing the tariff thing, there were already massive tariffs on beef and milk and dairy. within the United States. So the reason for that being is that the United States has a massive dairy and beef domestic infrastructure. Like it is absolutely massive, and both with beef and dairy, about 85 to 90% of what we produce for dairy and beef in the United States gets used directly here. So what those tariffs would do with that is that actually protects those domestic markets from importing beef at a lower price. That way that the people working here that work in dairy or work in beef can actually make more money. But when Trump allows that beef to get imported here, and because it's from Javier Milei, you know, his good friend and buddy, he's probably not going to be tariffed when he does that. And because he's not going to be tariffed, that means that he can sell at a lower price and basically screw the American ranchers. That's why they're pissed. They voted for Trump. The majority of them. There's probably some that didn't, but the majority of them did. And now they're allowing an imported beef from Argentina to come in without a tariff to basically undercut them even more than they're already being undercut.
Production in America. For that, we spoke to Charles Benoit from Coalition for a Prosperous America.
We have to start thinking of this as an essential public service, whether it's we regulate it like a utility, like we do for electricity, or whether we just have state and county governments get more into the business. And I emphasize more because they've already done that in the past. The city of Austin had a very large cattle processing facility in the 1940s. And even today, we've got small county-owned and operated ones, including in Florida, from New Mexico. These are really small. They do like 50 cows a day, but the principle is there. And so that's how we have to think of this industry now.
It's just above
nationalizing our beef industry might seem radical, but the Trump administration has already shown a willingness for state involvement in key industries that they've deemed important for national security. So should we view beef in the same way?
Yeah,
and what do people in this deep red state think about the government stepping in?
These private industries, their responsibility is to their shareholders. So on their end, they're not doing anything wrong. They're doing what they need to do. So my message, I guess, to the government is that we need to enact policies to prevent such things from happening, and not just go around and having press conferences and talking points and post on X. Those do nothing. We need actual concrete legislation passed to prevent such things and to help the working class, to help everybody that's not involved in the corporate level or the billion-dollar industries.
Hundreds.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very interesting thing. Coming from people that live out in these areas, in these rural areas, there's a main thing that you should really keep in mind. The main thing to keep in mind is that even though these people will say that they don't want the government in their business and they don't want the government they want the government to leave them alone. They don't want to pay taxes. They don't want to do all this stuff. You've heard every talking point under the sun. The difference is that in this instance here, they actually want them to do something. The majority of them probably want it done at the state level, but that's not going to fix anything. You're just going to have, like Cargill, Tyson, JWS, that's the one I forgot actually, and National Beef. They'll just move to a different state where they can operate the same way that they have been operating. This has to be done at a federal level. These companies need to be brought to heel because otherwise they will just work outside the state that's not working with them. And that's just the crux of the matter. You can't just have like a Montana or like a Wyoming rancher be like, we want to make sure that the state has fair pricing for cattle in Wyoming, because you know what's going to happen? The plant is going to move out of Wyoming or move out of Montana, and they're going to move over to North Dakota, where it's a lot more friendly for them, and they don't have to worry about like the state regulating how they're going to price cattle. So this is where you're going to have a major issue, is that people that don't want the federal government involved in their lives are going to need to have a little bit of federal government involved in their lives in order to make it so that they can continue making a living. Because right now, the way that these meat packers operate, they're making it so that these people are doing subsistence living. All I'm going to say is that it's backbreaking work for little pay as it is right now. It wasn't before. It is now.
Have already left Lexington, and many more are expected to follow in the coming months, leaving those who remain facing an uncertain
Everybody's going to leave.
It's been chaos. A lot of families are unsure what they're going to do.
It hurts all of us. We're losing good people, good workers, good friends.
Ready for the Husker game tomorrow night?
Yeah, tomorrow the volleyball game, right?
Already people here have to work multiple jobs to try to survive.
Right.
Yep.
So as these jobs go away, I mean, how are people going to make it?
They're going to struggle. A lot of people are going to struggle.
Yeah. We're going to keep following this story as it unfolds. If you're a Tyson worker or have insight into Tyson's business practices, send us tips at stories@perfectunion.us. And before you go, please support our work by liking this video and subscribing to our channel.
Struggling for them doesn't necessarily just mean that there's going to be like less jobs. Like that is a part of it, but there's another aspect to this that like many people aren't seeing. When you lose 3,000 jobs in a town like that, and like the employment options for that town and the surrounding areas in that town can't sustain. Let's say that it can sustain maybe 300 of those 3,000 people. That means 2,700 people have to leave and go someplace else. Now, what happens when people leave and go someplace else? That means that the restaurants in town, that means the businesses in town, that means everything else in town takes a 3,000 person hit for the numbers of reoccurring customers that would come in on a regular basis. That means that those people are now going elsewhere because they have to move to where the work is, and that means that the other shops in town are getting less revenue. So that means this is how those small towns die. Remember when I was talking about Coffeyville, Kansas, and we were talking about the Amazon distribution center and the refinery there, that they were the main sources of jobs? When you would drive through the town back during this time period, restaurants everywhere. You'd drive by, McDonald's. There was a local pizza shop called Poplar Pizza. It burnt down, but it was there was Daily Donuts. Daily Donuts was another place that was there. There were Tavern on the Plaza was a historical site, like for a restaurant that was there. There were multiple different places and many options to go to. If you go back there right now, like a good 60% of those are all gone, just gone. And the reason is because after that distribution center and the refinery shut down, the jobs left. And the next nearest town where you can find work that would have been sustainable would have been Independence or Bartlesville. Bartlesville is a 45-minute drive away, and Independence was about, maybe a little over 30 minutes to get to a place where you could find adequate work, like a big enough city with adequate work. So when something like that happens, people just move. Like, people will move to different locations to where they can find work, and they will leave these small towns, and these small towns become what they call sleeper towns, where there's just vacant houses, vacant lots, and the people that live there only eat and sleep there, and when they want to do anything else, they go out of town to do it. That's all there is. The thing is that what they're worried about is that happening in Lexington in this situation here with the Tyson plant. The exact same thing that happened in Coffeyville that I explained before can happen here. And if this happens here, that affects also the businesses and everything inside that town. And it's kind of a domino effect where this destroys the amount of revenue that's going to be going through the town, and slowly but surely all of these different shops just start to close. And then people start to leave, and then more people start to leave, and it's just a cascading effect. But the thing to also keep in mind is this also affects what happens with schools, because I work in education. When schools have less students, that means schools get less funding. The majority of places, whether it be whatever your state you're in, I think it's between like $7,000 and $11,000 per student is the amount of money a school gets per year per student. And so what happens is that when people leave, that means there's less money per student coming in. And certain like schools have a particular threshold where if they can't meet this monetary threshold and the state is not going to back them without that monetary threshold, the schools can't operate. They won't have enough money for teachers. They won't have enough money for different activities and all these different things. When your town loses 3,000 people, that's a lot of kids leaving too, which means that also affects education as well as all of the local economy at the same time. So when I say this is a cascading effect, this is a multi-level cascading effect. And remember, all of this is because of fiduciary responsibility. The fix that they can do for this here is basically they need to break up these meat packers, and they have to make it so that these meat packers actually have to compete for the beef that's within the United States. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about this. The other thing is that we need to have stronger unions, especially for meat packer unions. And those unions need to be backed by the government. They need to be backed by the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Bureau, so that they can get the proper help that they need to make sure that these meat packers aren't screwing them as well as screwing the ranchers, because this is a twofold front. I'll say this and I'll say it again. There's many things that are fair, and then there are things that are right. Moving your company and moving in a way where you have the least amount of competition and that's fair. I mean, you're trying to work that way. If you're doing that and you're screwing over the people that give you the raw materials, and you're screwing over the people that work there to make even more money, that's not right. Let's focus more on what's right instead of what's fair in this situation. That way, the ranchers can get their money, the workers can get their money, and maybe even the corporation can still turn a profit. Hi there, this is DesperadoSensei with FOFA News. We'd just like to remind you to like and subscribe for our content, and also follow us on Substack. Every now and then we write pieces that don't necessarily turn out to be videos, so check us out when you get a chance. Thank you. Bye.